Doesn't seem like many more people are joining, so we'll get started now, and anybody still joins, they'll just have to join late. Hello all, and welcome to our Festival Debate event, Air Pollution, Are Clean Air Zones the Answer? On behalf of the organising team and the Grantham Centre for Sustainable Futures, thank you all for coming. First, a quick intro into how the event will run. Each of our speakers will give a presentation of about 10 minutes, which will then be followed by a 5-minute period where you can ask any pressing questions you have for that speaker. Then, after all the speakers have given their talks, there'll be a longer period for questions and a discussion with the speakers. Secondly, I'd like to tell you all about Step Up Sheffield. This is a rewards programme for staff and students launched by the university to promote sustainable behaviour. To earn points, all you need to do is travel to uni by a sustainable method. So that you can then use these points at any Genius Cafe or spend them at a variety of local businesses or to donate to charity. To join up, you need to download the Better Points app from the App Store or Google Play Store and register to join using your university email address. If you don't use the uni email address, you won't be able to join Step Up, but if you do, you'll be automatically registered. Then you just need to enable tracking and you'll start earning points. For more information, visit stepupsheffield.betterpoints.uk. And now I'm delighted to introduce our chair for the event, Dr. Maria Val-Martin. Maria began her research career with a PhD with a focus in atmospheric chemistry at Michigan Tech University. From there, she worked as a researcher at Harvard, was then a visiting scientist at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, which was followed by work as a researcher at Colorado State University. In 2014, she came to the University of Sheffield, starting work as a research and teaching fellow in the chemical engineering department, before moving to the new job as a researcher at the Leverhulme Centre for Climate Change Mitigation. Since 2020, she's been a UKRI Future Leaders Fellow in the School of Biosciences. The focus of her group's research is on understanding the interactions between the biosphere, atmosphere, and climate, and the use of nature-based solutions to mitigate climate change. Maria is also a passionate advocate for science in the community. She, as an atmospheric scientist, she runs an air quality garden in the Sheffield Botanical Gardens and organises outreach events to raise public awareness about air pollution. She was also a part of the team that evaluated the first school streets implemented in Sheffield at Bannerdale Road in 2019 as a trial. Maria, over to you.
Perfect. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, thank you. So thank you so much, Rob, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Festival of Debate panel discussion around Clean Air Zones. So it's an honor to be chairing this panel and actually sharing the event with a very fantastic and very, very interdisciplinary group of panelists. Before I start, I would like to say thank you, as Rob, to the Grantham Centre for bringing us together today, as well, and in particular to a group of PhD scholars that have been organizing and coordinating this event. So without any specific order, I know that you are behind the cameras. Thank you so much to Alan Barlow, Rob Matthews, that we have seen introducing me, Lian Cohn, Lucas Joel, Marcin Fokora, and Katie Rees. Thank you so much. It takes great effort to put these events together. So thank you so much. So before I use up all my time, I was given 5 minutes. I was also told to talk a little bit about Clean Air Zones, especially for the members of the audience that are not familiar with this topic. So what are Clean Air Zones, or what we are going to call today CAS as a surname? They are also being called low emission zones. These are specific areas in the city where measures or schemes are implemented to improve air quality. And especially they are implemented to reduce pollution levels from traffic and targeting nitrogen dioxide, NO2. And we will hear about that today more. So a little bit of the peak of policy behind these schemes. The CAS policy was required to be implemented in the UK by the government, and it goes back to 2017 with the publication of the NO2 plan that state that there was a requirement to reduce roadside nitrogen dioxide concentrations. Later on, the Clean Air Strategy was published in 2019 and was also a state that air quality needed to be improved to protect public health and the environment. So there was no choice. Many cities in the UK had high levels of air pollution, And they were given about 5-6 years to meet air quality levels that didn't breach illegal limits. And the CAS was one of the tools that were given through this strategy. In Sheffield, the CAS was introduced by the City Council in February 2013, and actually was the last city in the UK to have this scheme implemented. And why it was implemented? Well, we know that historically, Sheffield was one of the most polluted cities in Europe back in 1960. So this is not a ranking to be proud of. But today, we don't have those levels of air pollution that's back in the 60s. But there are many places in the city that air quality still exceeds the UK and the World Health Organization healthy limits. So in Sheffield alone, air pollution is estimated to contribute to about 500 premature deaths per year. So that was one of the reasons that the CAS was implemented in Sheffield. What it consists of, the CAS imposes, what it has is this scheme imposes a charge on highly polluted vehicles enter the city center, with the older diesel vans and taxis having a daily charge of £10, and older coaches, buses, and lorries having a charge of £50 a day. So now we know, is it working? Well, we know that the City Council officer says that the CAS has been successful in terms of reducing the number of dirty vehicles entering the city center. Within the first year of operation, the CAS has generated over 7 million in revenue. And some of these actually financial benefits are going to be used to improve air quality in other parts of the city, like schools. Also, recently in the media was said that some of these benefits or this revenue is going to be used to decommission the scheme in the future. Now, one of the things that we can ask ourselves as well is that, what about air quality? What about air pollution? The City Council hasn't shown any data on the air quality effects, although it is expected that these results will be released this summer. But we might hear some preliminary results today from one of the panelists. So this is a really exciting topic to be discussing today. So before any further ado, let's start the debate. Are cleaner zones the answer for air pollution? Yes, no, sometimes. So I want to introduce our first panelist, who is Olivia Blake. So this is a really, really honor, Olivia, to be introducing you today. She is the MP for Sheffield Hallam, representing the Labour Party. Olivia was a Sheffield City Councillor from 2014 to 2020 and was elected Deputy Leader of the Council in April 2017. In 2019, she was elected as the Member of Parliament for Sheffield Hallam. But during her time as MP, Olivia has been a consistent advocate of fighting climate change. In 2021, she created a Hallam Citizen Climate Manifesto to inform the government of Hallam's priority for COP26. And in 2023, she introduced the Climate and Ecology Bill in the House of Commons. Olivia frequently campaigns in Parliament for local issues, for example, to ban moorland burning. So please, Olivia, the floor is yours now. So if you have your presentation, or
yeah, I'm just going to speak to you.
Turn on your camera. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully you can see and hear me.
We can see
brilliant.
you
Okay.
and we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you to the Festival of Debate for inviting me to speak this year again. I'm always looking forward to speaking at these sorts of events. It's what makes being a Sheffield MP so brilliant, is that we do have these debates going on in the Festival of Debate. And I'm also speaking at an event on the importance of a Green New Deal on the 16th of May as part of the festival. I think that it's important to start this conversation today just to remind ourselves about some of the issues that Maria was kind of highlighting. 500 premature deaths a year in South Yorkshire is a big statistic. And it's important because by 2030, British Heart Foundation have predicted that Air pollution will be causing 15,000 deaths in Yorkshire over the decade, and about 1,430 deaths in Sheffield alone. It's shocking, but perhaps not entirely surprising, that the UK has one of the highest rates of asthmatic children across Europe, with one in 11 young people living with asthma. It's been calculated that cleaner air could prevent up to 43,000 avoidable deaths each and every year in the UK. And we also know the risks aren't spread evenly, that this is also an issue of social justice as well. People living in deprived communities are most likely to suffer adverse health effects from poor air quality. Children, older people, and those with pre-existing health conditions are particularly vulnerable to the effects of poor air quality. And as we all know, in 2020, a coroner found air pollution was a significant contributing factor to the death of a 9-year-old girl from Lewisham. It's not new or surprising information that the toxic air that we are all breathing is a major public health emergency, yet the government has repeatedly failed to respond with the urgency that is required. For example, take the much delayed Environment Act. Not only is the deadline for meeting the air quality targets a distant 2040, the targets within that are twice the limit recommended by the World Health Organization. And just to say, Labour is committed to a Clean Air Act when we get into government, and we have made that argument throughout the Environment Act and tried to get that in there. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful, but it's still one of our deep commitments to take this issue seriously with the approach that is needed. But in our city, I think we have taken a slightly different approach, going right back to the 19th century. Sheffield socialist Edward Carpenter and his series of essays, The Smoke Dragon, led to a lively public discussion about air quality in our city. Not only have we seen the recent debate about clean air zones in the city centre, but air pollution has also been a significant theme in my postbag, especially since the moorland burning that we've seen take place last October, which was particularly bad for people suffering from asthma and other lung conditions. They have also written to me to raise concerns about burning wood as well in the city, and how that might impact, and different issues that I think we do need to kind of think of in the whole round. But last autumn was a particular turning point on peatland burning, and a constituent who happened to be conducting research in the area found that smoke engulfing Hallam had skyrocketed the air pollution to 4 times the legal limit and had devastating health impacts. As I've mentioned, people were contacting me who were really suffering, struggling to breathe. Across the country, peat fires are throwing out millions of tons of CO2 into our atmosphere and a lot of particulate matter. This is wet vegetation, which when burnt does produce terrible particulates, as we know. So air quality isn't just a city centre issue. Everywhere should be a clean air zone. But how we achieve that depends on the context. And in the case of the burns, I strongly believe that we need to find, and there are, much more environmentally friendly strategies for re-retting and regenerating our moorlands, not burning them, which is also beneficial to biodiversity and other such issues. But in the city centre, the drivers of poor air quality are different, so that does need a different approach. And I think that the Clean Air Zone should be welcomed, and I'm hopeful that, you know, the actions that it has provided will provide one solution to the crisis that we're kind of talking about today. I think that there's no silver bullet with this as well, though, but obviously the Clean Air Zone aims to reduce the harmful levels of nitrogen dioxide caused by the most polluting vehicles. Clean air zones are just one effective tool that we have for tackling inner city air pollution. But I would have liked to see more funding from the government to support people transitioning to cleaner vehicles. I think that we did our best as a city, but I do think that we need to see more action centrally in order to make sure that we are supporting people to take action to get cleaner vehicles. We know that the UK is overly reliant on costly and emissions intensive modes of transport. And looking at our buses, you can see that actually this has impacted on the types of buses that we're seeing on our roads. One big example is the new free electric bus that's going around the city centre, which is really positive to see the council taking that step. But nationally, most journeys are still made by car. The majority commute to work by car or van. 78% of goods are moved by road rather than rail. In Sheffield City region, over 70% of people still commute by car, which has resulted in increased congestion, longer journey times, and continues to negatively impact our air quality and public health with increased particulates and NO2. Sheffield introduced its Clean Air Zone last year and has meant that we have seen less heavily polluting, non-compliant vans, lorries, buses, coaches, taxis coming into the city centre. Since its launch, the data suggests it's working in reducing those vehicles coming in, and the number of non-compliant vehicles has really reduced by nearly 2/3. So hopefully that is showing that people are making the switch to cleaner vehicles where they can, or different modes of travelling to work. While clean air zones are a fantastic start to improving our air quality, I believe they won't work in isolation to deal with the whole issue, but they're a massive first step. In 2020, in the lead up to COP26, like was mentioned, I held a series of 10 monthly meetings across the constituency to hear from people directly what their shared vision for a greener future would look like and how that could be impactful on people who live in Sheffield. Now, this was a really key part of my climate campaigning within Parliament. None of the ideas are my own. They all come from people who've put their ideas forward through these sessions, and that has made that it really a lot better to be able to take these issues to the heart of Parliament and the heart of debates at Westminster, because at the time when some pundits like to argue that climate action is undemocratic or something only politicians are interested in, it showed just how much people cared about the climate crisis, about air pollution, and the radical changes that we want to see in Sheffield and across the UK to deliver a greener and more just society. Importantly for today's discussion, the people who took part said we should ban polluting vehicles from entering the city centre. Like I said, this idea didn't come from me. This came from constituents who were concerned about air quality. But of course, over the discussion that we had around those issues, they also highlighted a new approach that is needed in our transport system, that we should have more investment in alternatives such as hydrogen, for example. I'm not advocating any particular one kind of technology, but also more incentives to replace diesel and highly polluting vehicles. They also described what they would like the future of public transport to look like, and ownership was a big issue on this. So nationally, we need more public transport. It needs to be more frequent, efficient, pleasant, and easy to use, and more convenient than private car use. I think one of the best ways of achieving this would be to take the profit motive out of the public transport system and put it into public control, which is exactly why I'm very glad that since we kind of did this manifesto, that's exactly what Labour mayors are trying to do across the country. We also need to look at the global picture. Improving air quality goes hand in hand with our net zero ambitions, and both should be looked in the whole. Maria, do I have much time, or have I gone over? Okay, so we really need to get on with it, and I think that, you know, I've been in Parliament trying to champion the fact that we need to look at these issues within the whole. We need to look at climate and the ecology. We need to look at air pollution and having greener transport available to people. I haven't had a chance to talk about active travel, but that's a whole other area that needs to kind of be dissected as well, and how we can get people more healthy through that as well, as improving air quality. So I'll stop there, but I'm really looking forward to the discussion today, and I'm sure that the scientists and all the various people on the call will have a better, more definitive answer to the question. But certainly I think that this is a key part in our step forward to tackling air quality in the city.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, we still have 5 minutes for questions, and we had a few that could even maybe cover some of the things that we didn't have time so to rush through today. But I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but we had a few questions, and for Olivia, maybe Olivia could just cover this. Are you still there? I lost.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, perfect. Because there is one question from Aidan McAdam that was related with the Clean Air Zone about business and careers, how if they welcome this scheme, and if not, if there were any measures that the Sheffield City Council could make to help business actually become more environmental, sustainable, and promote better air quality instead of having the CAS implemented, for example.
Yeah, I think there's some good examples of where it's worked and where it hasn't worked. So there are some vehicles that don't yet exist with the right technologies, and it's kind of, if you're looking at a carbon perspective, you might say actually having food that's produced locally, delivered locally, that's a benefit, even if the vehicles that they have no longer don't exist at the moment to be able to do that in the cleanest possible way. So I kind of understand that argument coming from certain businesses. However, I also think that there's a lot more that central government could be doing to provide grants and loans. And, the council have obviously provided grants and loans to some businesses. I don't think that's necessarily gone 100% well all of the time. But that's just what happens when you start a scheme. And I think that there has been a lot of learning, and I'm sure others on the call will talk more about that. But I certainly think there's definitely much more that could be happening from a central government around scrappage schemes. We had scrappage schemes in the past, which were very successful, and we haven't had a national scrappage scheme. So I think that kind of answers it. I think, we could always be doing more. I think definitely.
Yeah, I mean, another question that we had, it was from Jude Wilkinson, and everybody can ask question actually on the Q&A, so it's on the right side, and Gianna posted a message here. Now I start seeing the question, sorry. Let's see, how do we persuade others that the shift to sustainable travel, and that will be actually sustainable and active travel, something that you mentioned as well in your talk, is the right thing to do? We recently seen a battle lost on this, on the red double lines on Ecclesall Road and Abidell Road. How could the project has been done better? That's a real question.
I think that's a really good question. I think it's a little bit chicken and egg at the moment. It's difficult to convince people of what could be with our public transport system because it's been so degraded over so many years. Like, I get so many people contact me because they can no longer get home after work at night because the bus has been cut, or there's just simply no services on certain days of the week anymore, or they've had a half-hourly service become an hourly service, or even an hourly service become a 2-hourly service. There's been a real degradation, which is why I think actually what the mayor is doing about bringing in franchising is really important, because that will allow us to take control of our bus network and actually set the routes and set the timetables, set the fares, and that'll be really game changing. And I think that would unlock this conversation a lot more, because bus prioritization, I think for a lot of people, doesn't make sense if the bus service isn't good enough. So that's part of the problem. I mean, obviously, you could say, oh, well, we need the infrastructure there first, because otherwise bus prioritization would never happen, which is certainly what the bus companies have said to me. Without bus prioritization, we're always going to have a rubbish service. Now, I don't believe that fully. I think that with a different system, we could have a good service. So I think it's just very difficult to have the conversation at the moment, but the urgency in which we need to kind of come to these resolutions and find ways of promoting projects is really, really important. But we can't isolate communities. We kind of need to bring communities along with us, which I don't think happened necessarily with that particular project.
Okay, thank you. We need to, because of time, we need to move to the next panelist, and there are a few questions on the side that I'm reading. For example, on air quality data by seed, we can cover that with another panelist. And so let's move on then. Thank you so much, Olivia, for joining us today and spending time with us. So now the next speaker that I have here is Dr. Rohit Chakraborty. So Rohit, are you online?
Yeah.
Perfect. Do you need to share any slides?
Yeah, I could share my screen.
Okay, so I can start introducing you while you put the presentation on them. So Rohit actually is a graduate from University of Sheffield and a Grantham Scholar. His PhD focused on developing low-cost Internet of Things-based sensor networks for monitoring and communicating urban air pollution levels. And this work was acknowledged many times in the media, especially on the wood-burning topic. Rohit is now an environmental public health scientist at the UK HSA, so it's the UK, the Health Service. I always lose security agency. This I always forget about it. There are so many acronyms, so yes, apologies for that. And his work focused on indoor air quality monitoring with the radiation, chemicals, and environmental hazards. So please, Rohit, I can see your presentation. It's not on presentation mode.
Okay.
I know.
Is it showing in a small window? Let me see.
It's legible though.
We can. I mean, we can see this. Yeah.
It may become illegible.
So just go slideshow from beginning. So yeah.
Maybe I'll do entire screen and do this. Does that work or?
No, yeah. Just yeah. We have you here. I'm going to turn off my camera so we can focus. Yes, great.
Is it full screen now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And it definitely changes the slides.
Yes, yeah, the slide that changed. So yes, please,
Okay.
please go ahead.
All right. Okay. Cool. It's always something happens. Thank you, by the way. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Olivia. That was great as well. Yeah, but I mean, Olivia's speech, that was really good because you sort of touched different bases, and that's really what it's like. It's not just NO2 or cars. It's a lot of different aspects of air pollution. It's really complex. But I'm thinking now what to talk, considering I've touched so many points. I'll try to look at it in a slightly different angle, but as the presentation continues, it'll probably become more clear to myself and everyone else. Hello, I'm Rohit. As Maria said, I'm a ex-Grantham scholar, and I currently work for UKHSA. UKHSA, UK Health Security Agency. It's known by different names back in the days. I think was called Public Health England before COVID. And within UKHSA, I'm part of Air Quality and Public Health Group, AQPH. And those who don't know what UKHSA, who we are sort of a center for health protection, oversimplifying, but that's what it is. We try to protect health and prevent any future health-related issues. This could be from wide ranges, multiple reasons or sources. Could be like environmental, could be some infectious disease and things like that. Air quality is a very tiny part of UKHSA, what we do, and within that, my role is more on air quality monitoring, and policies around monitoring and modeling, a little bit of modeling as well. Moving on a little bit, Maria again touched on this, but I graduated end of 2022 on air pollution monitoring and modeling in cities, focusing on Sheffield. Graham, is on the call, I've worked with him extensively before on monitoring and low-cost sensors. He can mention that later on. Post-graduation, I worked with Aerated, which is a private company, and I worked more on as an air quality scientist there on monitoring indoor air quality, not much outdoor. Afterwards, and last year, October, I just recently joined UKHSA, and I'm trying to integrate more air quality monitoring and data and standardization of outdoor and indoor air quality and how it relates and interacts with public health. So that's currently my aim, really. So those who don't know about monitoring, just a quick one. We have different types of monitoring in Sheffield and everywhere else. The left one, these are quite expensive monitoring equipments that generally councils or DEFRA run through, like Ricardo and other agencies. They have these big boxes, which are really the reference grid analyzes the best solution to monitor air quality. They are very expensive, as you can see, and we have about 7, or I think there are 8 currently in Sheffield, which operates, and it's not enough, and you can't really have enough of these. But there are the mid-range sensors, which cost from anywhere from between 5 and 10 grand, and they are pretty good. They're very accurate, but again, it's not many you can afford. We had a network of about 40 sensors in Sheffield in the last 4 or 5 years, but they have now been decommissioned because it's also costly to run every year. Which brings to the solution of low-cost sensors, which was my PhD around. So low-cost sensors can cost even less, like it could start from like 20, 30 pounds, and it could go up to like 200 to 50 pounds, so an average about 100 pounds. And these sensors really sort of helps to fill in the gaps where there are no sensors, but they have issues with like accuracy and data quality and stuff. So during my PhD, I was trying to work with these sensors and see how we can use these sensors and inform policy, but make sure the data that comes out of it is accurate enough. So I'll go back to it later on, or maybe Graham would. But coming back to Clean Air Zone, it's outdoor air quality. Again, it's complicated. It's not just traffic, and it also is related to different it's related to other pollutants, let's say. So why do we even care about having intervention studies like Clean Air Zone, or they're like CCZ, they're like congestion zones, and there are U layers and layers in London, things like that. But yeah, Olivia touched on a bit. We have about 500 deaths in Sheffield overall, like 29 to 43,000 deaths or premature, even higher premature deaths, and other different issues due to air pollution that happens in the UK. Globally, 7 million. That's an old stat as well, but it's probably higher now. So, and yeah, the amount of issues we have, the short-term impacts from low levels as well as some spikes. They can, exacerbate asthma issues and coughing and things. And then there are the long-term impacts. There's some on the right side of the screen, and there are also some dementia and other illnesses that really gets complicated. So it's probably that's why we need interventions such as Clean Air Zone and other intervention that would tackle other sources of pollution. So I don't think there should be a question on why we need it. We definitely need to do something about it. Going a little bit on Sheffield now. So we have the data are slightly outdated, and they do need updating this year, I think. So these are all published by UKHSA. We are updating our dashboard. I'm currently working on it, but we do have, like Olivia mentioned, 18.1% population. This is based on NO2 and the vulnerability data. So this is the vulnerable population for NO2, 18.1% living in the top decile, the top 4 deciles of highest vulnerability. So that's the brown bit. I've only lived Sheffield in 6-7 years. I'm not sure which regions these are, but you could see the brown bits. They definitely, those are the areas that require some more work, and try to help these people. Secondly, again, the mortality. So this is particulate pollution. I don't have the stats for NO2, but it's estimated that 5.2% are like mortality attributable to particulate pollution in Sheffield. It was 2021. It was published in 2023, so it needs again updating. Which is, this number is still slightly below the England average, but quite high in Yorkshire, higher than the Yorkshire average, or South Yorkshire as well. The last is some profit we could actually have if we actually do take care of air pollution. A potential of less than 2 million by end of 2030 if we just take care of NO2, and 6 million by 2040. I've looked at PM2.5 pollution, particulate pollution. They also give you a good chunk of health benefits, saving money through NHS and social care, health and social care. So again, it's probably should answer why we should definitely look into air pollution. But my angle is also a little bit, comes in a bit different. Yes, there are limits we need to address and be below like 40 micrograms per cubic meter of NO2. That's fine, but that's just a number. That doesn't mean like if we are 39.99 we are fine and 40.01 we are not. That's not how health works. So we need to sort of understand what the personal exposure is and when that becomes a health risk. So looking at like that would probably, it's probably for the future. In the later we can talk about this a bit more, but the way I look is maybe there should be a range or ways to tackle that doesn't just address the threshold, but it should also look at the personal exposure, health risk. Doing that, you would then go down the rabbit hole where you would discover things like the toxicity of particles. Maybe you are decreasing the NO2 levels, but does it increase the toxicity of the particles as there are from electric vehicles, like brake pad wear, tire wear, road wear, things like that? Are the numbers, the concentration decreasing, but are the particle numbers increasing? So things like that would be really important to look at. And lastly, how much time do I have left? Sorry.
So yeah, when we want to wrap up, we have really interesting questions from the audience that you. So we would like to have some time for you to address those.
Quickly, we have looked at some results recently where QHSA, we did some literature review, and we saw there's some mixed results. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. The London ULEZ one definitely shows they've reduced some emission, but although the health outcomes are not that clear from it because of how the air pollution works, again, there's definitely evidence for cardiovascular disease improvement, but not much for others. But there are concerns, like Olivia mentioned. We can talk about that later, but there's definitely things that needs to be looked at. There are other interventions we have done in Sheffield as well around schools. We have thought there are problems, but I think my angle to that is more on behavior change, where ultimately we can't run these interventions forever, and it might require how to actually permanently change behavior around these things, where people driving to cars to schools could be discouraged, or reducing wood stove usage indoors, which impacts indoor as well as outdoors. That's really it. Thank you so much. And just wrapping up, I know Graham is the next speaker who could introduce a bit on speak sensors and stuff, which I've worked with him, and he might be able to tell a bit more on some of the sub work we have done in Sheffield. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohit. So we have a quick question from the audience about low-cost sensors and the use for public engagement and free. And so is free access for data. So if the low-cost sensors for public engagement have free access to data, and if so, that's having free access to data lead to wider public acceptance on engagement with low carbon initiatives within the cities? So what is your experience about working with low carbon, low sensors, and how to reach the public for public engagement, and how reliables are to convince people to use the data?
So they are publicly available. I'm pretty sure Graham can also chip in with this. There's loads of sensors online still. They're all available. We have tried to do some interventions around using these sensors, but it has been around more wood stoves and not carbon emission related. It's more particulate pollution we have been measuring here. But it's something we would like to explore, definitely.
So maybe we can ask Graham later about that question as well, and the use of low-cost sensors. There is a question actually about broom drift, so which is one of the areas that you have shown in the map. So what measures will improve air quality in areas such as broom drift, where we have high levels of vulnerable people? Some of the local monitoring sensors there have shown that the air quality actually has been worsening since the introduction of the cars, because some of the displacement of the polluting vehicles had been done. So it's a question about, are we sacrificing a zone?
Yeah, so this is something that was observed in Clean Air Zone Bristol as well. They found there was a lot of displacement happening where the council claimed the reduction in levels, whereas the researchers at the Uni of Bristol published about how they got displaced around. So that's definitely something that's needs to be looked at.
Okay. So no problem. Thank you so much for your contribution, Rohit. And let me introduce the next speaker. Graham, do you have slides to show?
Yeah, I have a few slides. They're not very exciting, but yeah, I do.
Okay, well, do you want to put the presentation up and I can start introducing just for the sake of time? And so it's a pleasure to introduce Graham Turnbull, and he is a really well-known person in the community. In 2017, he founded Clean Air Sheffield, and that's a non-profit organization which aims to independently monitor air quality in Sheffield and provide accessible information to communities about the sources and the health impacts of air pollution. Graham has been a prolific campaigner on air pollution in Sheffield, and has raised awareness of issues such as Sheffield school experiencing high levels or dangerous levels of air pollution, as well as he has been the creator of an exhibition using color light linked to air quality sensors to demonstrate urban pollution from wood burners and bonfires. So all to you now, Graham.
Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen and we can hear you. And people in the audience, if you guys have any questions, please, there is this Q&A on the right side of your screen that you can add the questions for Graham. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to the organizers of this event. It's really great to be here. I haven't spoken on air pollution for quite a while. Those people who know me will know I've had some serious health challenges in the past year. So it's great to be back, so to speak. I'm not a traditional Labour voter, but I thought, Olivia, that was an amazing introduction to this topic, the more wide topic of air pollution rather than just the Clean Air Zone. And Rohit, great to see and hear you again, of course. So Sheffield Clean Air Zone, this is supposed to be a debate, right? So I'm going to say, as a campaigner, as someone who's been monitoring air pollution for a while, it's not great. I'm sorry. But why isn't it great? Okay, maybe I should say something before I go on. It's not great, and it's not the council's fault this time, okay? So everyone likes to blame the council for everything, and this is something that's really out of control, and I'll show you why. So the Sheffield CAS is a Class C CAS, which only covers HGVs, LGVs, vans. Anything Euro 6 is newer is exempt. If you're not familiar with Euro 6, it's kind of the latest, diesel engine technology that produces less nitrogen dioxide. Euro 6 was implemented in 2015, so you could actually have a diesel lorry going around the ring road or a diesel bus, which is 9 years old, and it's exempt. So you have to think what's left, right? Why are we including so few vehicles in our CAS? Like I said, it's not the council's fault. The purpose of a CAS, it's a legal instrument. The purpose of it, again, Olivia touched on this, but it comes from a complete failure of central government over the last decade. Not just doing nothing, but also obstructing things that we've been forced to do, by Europe and things like that. And by the world, suggested by the World Health Organization. That's been fought in the courts with central government for a decade. So we finally have a Clean Air Zone intervention. The problem with it, as I said, it's a legal it's a legal tool. And the idea is to bring nitrogen dioxide pollution below the legal limit of 40 micrograms per cubic meter in all the metropolitan areas of the UK. Of course, Sheffield and Rotherham being one of those areas which our CAS is meant to address. So what's wrong? What's wrong with the CAS when I say that it's not great? Well, it's not great because its aim is to reduce nitrogen dioxide air pollution from down to 40 micrograms per cubic meter. The World Health Organization, for comparison, is recommending right now 10 micrograms per cubic meter. So this isn't going to give us it's not going to give us healthy or safe air. It's going to give us legal air. And this misalignment has caused this problem. So what can a CAS do? Like I said, it can achieve this legal objective of 40 micrograms per cubic meter. But, the thing is that in Sheffield, we actually have pretty decent air compared to some areas. So a 40 microgram target isn't ambitious at all. In fact, most places in Sheffield are already compliant. When you think about it, Sheffield is a pretty green city. Lots of trees, lots of open space, the Peak District, prevailing winds from the southwest, which means we get usually a healthy dose of fresh air on most days. We do have some issues. We have the taxi rank at the train station is kind of famous for having really terrible air quality, as some of the platforms at the station, because of the old-fashioned diesel trains that we have. There's some bits of the parkway that have, I didn't put up the graphs in this, sorry, I didn't have much time to prepare today, but we have bits of the parkway where we exceed the 40 microgram limit. But the areas I'm talking about, they're not even in the clean air zone, right? I mean, we're not doing anything to tackle that particular problem. So can the CAS make a difference? In my opinion, no. Since the CAS was implemented in February last year, a couple of journalists, they've approached me and said, "You're Mr. Clean Air in Sheffield. How's the CAS? Is it working?" And I've been really reluctant to talk about the effectiveness of our CAS because, as been touched on before, other local authorities, Bristol and Birmingham are two examples that I know of, have tried to make estimates and have kind of bragged about how effective their clean air zone is. And I just don't think there's any basis. In fact, one thing I admire about Sheffield Council is that so far, at least, they haven't tried to show a quantitative difference in the air pollution. They've talked instead about compliant vehicles. And I think that's the right approach. We don't really know. And, comparing February of this year to February of last year, it's problematic. The winds could be coming from a different direction. There could be more wind. There could be less humidity. The barometric pressure could be different. So Birmingham example, I know that Rohit talked about Bristol, but in Birmingham, I've got the numbers in 2022, the levels of nitrogen dioxide in clean air zone in the zone, interesting, reduced by an average 17% when compared to 2019 pre-COVID results. And when compared to 2016, the base year, for the original modeling of their clean air zone, there's been a reduction of 37%. My question would be, what happened outside the zone? Was there displacement? Was weather taken into account? There's probably some pretty smart people in Birmingham that will have looked at this, and in Bristol as well, at the universities there, and would have said, yeah, we've taken weather into account. We just don't know. And maybe the public doesn't care, but I just think I'd rather know how they've come about these numbers. So will it make a difference in Sheffield? Probably not, for the reasons that I've already talked about. quite rightly, the council have talked about reduction in non-compliant vehicles, and that's easy to measure because we've got a number plate recognition, so we can look up all the vehicles passing through, passing along the ring road or into town, and we can actually say, we've got the data that can say, yeah, the more of the vehicles are compliant now. Maybe we can compare the same vehicles that were driving from a year or two ago. Were some of them upgraded? Yeah, probably. And have some displaced? Yeah, probably some displacement as well. And, it's hard to know the impact on air quality in those suburban areas because Rohit's already touched upon this, but we don't really have that many monitoring stations. Rohit touched upon, if you can see the camera, can you see? I'm holding up one of these. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see the camera.
Great. I'm holding up. It's probably better to look at this than me. I'm holding up this low-cost air quality monitor that is actually Rohit's idea. I came to him and I said, I want to measure air pollution. The sensors are 300 pounds from the US. And he said, make your own. They cost 30 pounds in parts. And so Rohit actually got me some funding and, obviously lent me his technical experience. And we did this together. And I don't know, Rohit, I'm sure now I've made over 100 of these. And I think we actually installed in Sheffield somewhere between 50 and 100. And I think 35, 45 of them are still working, which is great. But again, COVID kind of messed things up. I wasn't going to people's houses and installing things. And the sensors do need some maintenance. So anyway, we have been really busy in Sheffield measuring, when I say we, Rohit and I, some other friends, busy measuring PM 2.5. And PM 2.5 doesn't come from cars. It comes from burning solid fuels, right? The moorland burning that Olivia touched on, wood burning, fireplaces, and also bonfires. So I actually captured some data for the council in and around the big allotment site at Healy and Mearsbrook and said, look, here's the impact, and here's the impact when we've got a burning ban. Here's the impact on the local residents who had complained historically about the smoke. It's not very nice sitting in your garden and there's smoke from people's bonfires coming into your house and things. And so I actually produced a lot of data. I presented it to the council on a couple of occasions and nothing was really done about it. So there's a big question here about, are we doing enough about air pollution? I have slides for this. I did a study of primary schools that was published in the Star maybe a year or two ago, and I looked at what are the most polluted primary schools in Sheffield, and where are they? And I'll tell you what, a friend of mine who's a campaigner from Walkley, he said, hey, let's take your top 10 most polluted primaries in Sheffield and let's see where the white people live. And I don't have to tell you any more than that. You'll all be able to guess what happened. There's Olivia Blake touched on the social justice issue, and there is definitely an inequality in this town on a number of levels, and on one of those levels is air quality. My son goes to a school in Dore. They have perfectly clean air there. The most polluted primary is walking distance from where I live in Netheredge and Sharrow. It's thought of as kind of a leafy neighborhood, but there's a school there that's more polluted than 97% of the addresses in the UK, according to addresspollution.org. It's next door to a mosque, one of the biggest mosques in Sheffield, which is more polluted than 95% of the addresses in the UK. And the council response to this, we have council monitoring there, which is great. That's why we know. But the council response to this, well, let's increase the width of the junction at Broadfield and London roads to help the traffic flow more smoothly, which is a euphemism for get more cars through the junction. And then those cars will drive past the most polluted primary school in Sheffield. So is the CADS the answer? No, probably not. Are there other things we can do in light of, the central government's kind of uselessness on this topic? Yes, there are other things we can do and not do. That's all I want to say. I hope there's some questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you so much, Graham, and it's really good to see you here today with us. So there is a few questions here for you, and one is about maybe you can answer the question about the local sensor, how useful are to reach a wider audience actually, and maybe to implement new initiatives based on the data that we collect from them?
Yeah, I probably could have done a whole talk on these. The topic was, the debate was about the clean air zone, so I didn't focus on these. So thank you, Rohit, for mentioning them. So the point of these is, I said I know I've built 140 of these. They weren't all deployed in Sheffield. Some deployed in London, Newbury, different places. And so where I've used these in Sheffield, let's say round numbers, I've deployed, I don't know, 100 of them, round numbers. Well, what I say to people that ask that kind of question is, that's 100 conversations. You know, I've gone to people's houses with these things, and while you're there, you know, you say to them, are you concerned about air pollution? You know, yeah, and they say, yeah, I'm really concerned about air pollution and my kids and, you know, my health. I've got emphysema, I've got COPD, my kids have asthma. And then I look, and there's a pile of wood outside their house. And I say, oh, you're heating your house with wood. And they say, yeah, we love it. We live at Mearsbrook, we live in Netheredge, we love our wood burner. You know, it's something that people strive for. You know, people want these wood burners. They want to have lovely bonfires in their garden and on their allotment plots. And I say to them, do you know that burning solid fuels, for whatever reason, it's the #1 cause of PM 2.5 pollution, you know, ultra fine particle pollution. And it's actually, if you look at the contributory deaths in the UK, there's actually more of it coming from PM 2.5 than nitrogen dioxide. It's just that there are legal cases brought against the central government on nitrogen dioxide and not on PM 2.5. So guess what? We're trying to tackle the nitrogen dioxide problem, and not even very well.
Thank you. So there is a question actually from that was sent from one of the members of the audience, Carolina Valero in Stampa, that because you work with a community, so she posted a question about what can we do actually individually as a community to have cleaner air. I mean, we are talking about cars, but as a community, I mean, you touch about wood burning, but as a community to tackle nitrogen dioxide, what do you think that we could do?
I think, you know, I have a Labour councillor currently teaching my son piano on Fridays, and she always hangs around a bit, and we talk about this, you know. And one of the topic last Friday was these kind of active neighborhoods and low traffic neighborhoods, and just how badly people respond to them. So as a community, we can be, you know, where the council is trying, you know, as communities, we can be a bit more accepting of these schemes. And, you know, of course, she had some good ideas about how to make the schemes more palatable. You know, we're not good at communicating to our residents. You know, we're not good at selling these initiatives. I don't know, that's a bigger topic, but, you know, I have Maria, you'll be familiar with our
Oh, I think we just
I said
lost.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
I'm back.
We lost you. So yeah, we lost you.
Yes,
Yes,
sorry.
perfect.
This
yes.
happened with this. I moved last week, and I don't have everything perfectly set up yet. But anyway, yeah, I think we have to do a better job of communicating. I know we do consultations in Sheffield. We're kind of famous for them. Everyone thinks they're a waste of time. We have to do a better job, I think, of communicating the benefits of active travel, of low traffic neighborhoods, of, you know, we know this. We know this.
Yeah. So just one quick question. Any chance of the art installation coming back anytime soon? Are you feeling better?
You know what? I just moved in temporarily into a new house, and I have it. It's in I have lots of boxes. I have 3 boxes of pollution sensor parts, and I have another 3 boxes of lights of colored smart bulbs that I used in the exhibition a year ago. That exhibition was such hard work, and I think it kind of put me off doing anything else for months last year. I would love to find a permanent home for it, a public home for it. I wasn't successful in doing so. Yeah, I'll keep an eye on it. Sorry about that.
We lost you again, Graham.
I want to find somewhere.
Anyway, but we will look. we can talk about that. Maybe we can find something at University of Sheffield to host that exhibition. Actually, that would be really interesting, really relevant to bring to our
be
students
interested
here.
in putting it up again. About 105 people saw it last year. Thanks to Blog Projects for giving me some free galleries. And yeah, at some point.
Okay. So let's move to the last speaker, but not least, just for the sake of time. So we have Dr. James Weber. Are you online, James?
Yeah.
Perfect. So if you don't mind to put your slides up, I can just introduce you in the meanwhile. So James completed his PhD in atmospheric chemistry in the University of Cambridge, and then he became a researcher, actually in my group at the University of Sheffield and the School of Biosciences. And actually, James left recently and has become a lecturer at the Department of Meteorology at the University of Reading. His research focuses on climate change mitigation as well as air quality. And his work on air quality has included studying the effects of the Sheffield air quality from the Moorland fires. And some of his results were quoted by Olivia Blake during her presentation. And he has also been doing an analysis on the changes in nitrogen dioxide from the implementation of the Sheffield Clean Air Zone. So James, all to you. We can see your presentation. You are not in presenting mode yet.
Is that better?
No, you need to
Let's try it.
go to the beginning and
sorry.
yeah.
How's that?
Oh, something's happening.
Yes. Well, it's still on. Just need to start the slide. So from the you have two screens. So can you make your there we go. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you can you move it now and see if we move? Can you? Oh yes, it's moving then. Perfect
Okay,
then.
good.
It's all to you now. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Maria. Thanks to Katie and all the other organisers for having me on. And this is work done by a team. So as Maria says, I'm now at Reading, but I was at Sheffield for a very enjoyable 2.5 years. And this is work done by Euripides, my colleague James, Richard Beaumont, who did his undergraduate project and dissertation on this, and of course Maria. So this is just a map of some of the sites that we looked at in the Clean Air Zone and nearby. So the Clean Air Zone is shown in the dark blue colour there. We've got Devonshire Green and Barnsley Road, which are DEFRA sites. So those correspond to the sort of top level measuring stations that Rohit mentioned. And then we've got some city council sites at Lowfield, Pond Hill and the Wicker in the red there. So we've got inside and outside the Clean Air Zone. And I think it is a good point that several other people have made that this covers a very small part of the city. And so we need to be very careful about where we do the analysis. And just because it's reduced in one area does not mean that the Clean Air Zone necessarily has worked. Just to give you a bit of context, then looking at Devonshire Green and Barnsley Road for the sites for which we have the longest time series, Barnsley Road exceeds the NO2 daily limit, which a site shouldn't exceed more than a handful of times a year by about 70% of days it's over. And in NO2, in Devonshire Green, which is not next to a busy road, but sort of close to a few, it's about 30%. So we need to be very careful looking at these longer term time series, of course, because things are improving all the time. And so here I just show the raw daily mean concentrations of NO2 and PM from Devonshire Green, and the superimposed dotted black line is the two limits set by the WHO. And you can see, particularly of NO2, that over moving from 2014 to the present day, we're seeing fewer and fewer exceedances. Nevertheless, we are exceeding the limit far too often. And if we do a trend, this is looking at both Devonshire Green on the top for NOx and PM 2.5, and Barnsley Road at the bottom. You can see that we do see statistically significant trends in most cases, except for the bottom left, and Barnsley Road and NOx. So all of these things are improving over time, and that's largely due to improvements in vehicle quality. So old vehicles are being taken off the road and replaced with new vehicles or electric vehicles. So I think, as Graham highlighted with some of the stuff about burning, traffic is really the only thing the clean air zone is going to affect directly, is one source, but certainly not the only source of these two air quality pollutants. And a really clear example of this is if we look at the diurnal profile of the pollutants, and this is just taken from Devonshire Green, and you plot it. What you do is you take an average over the whole year, and you look at the average concentration at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and so on, and you can see that NOx, so that's NO2 and NO, which is the sort of two chemicals produced by combustion in cars and vehicles. You can see a really strong spike in the grey shaded area corresponding to the morning rush hour, and a smaller one in the afternoon, evening. So it's going from about 40 to about over 120. You can see a smaller spike in PM in the same time zone. But what this is really telling us is that NOx really is driven by traffic, PM less so. So you might target traffic, and you might expect to improve NOx, but will you improve PM? That's a whole other matter. So this is a really important point, and Graham talked about some analysis that that is quoted in the media often, looking at the effect, quantifying the effect of a clean air zone by looking at the concentrations of pollutants before it's put in place and after. And ultimately, that's entirely the wrong way to do it, because as you might already guess, there are other trends dictating how pollution is progressing. So the statements that Birmingham used comparing 2016 trends to post-CAS trends in their case, and the CAS started there in 2021, are frankly not worth the paper they're written on, because there are so many other things in play, and 2016 was an entirely arbitrary start date. If you'd gone back even further, if you'd gone back to the 70s, for example, you would have shown an even bigger increase or improvement in air quality. So the way we need to think about these things is in terms of what we would call a counterfactual, and this is just illustrative data, but it's how we did our research. And you can imagine that if you see some air quality in the blue on the left-hand side, and that's just fluctuating but with a downward trend, then the CAS kicks in this dotted line, and then we have two futures, one without the CAS and one with the CAS. And you can see in this example, both of them exhibit a downward line, but one is going down more quickly than the other. And so the way, say, for example, Birmingham looked at it, and some people like to look at it, is, well, let's just compare, at the start of the CAS or just before with where we are at a given time after the CAS. And that would give you, that would suggest that the clean air zone has had a big effect. But of course, in reality, what's happened is the blue line, so the blue double-headed arrow here, this is what's been driven by other factors. So perhaps improving cars, getting old cars off the road, lorries and buses, etc., being retrofitted. The thing that's really important is this red bit here, which is the difference between the counterfactual, what would have happened had there been no CAS, and the clean air zone. And this is so poorly represented in the media that it can be very difficult to understand if a clean air zone has had any benefit at all. So, we've got what happened before the CAS, and we've got what happened after the CAS, because we can observe them. We measure them with the stuff that Rohit talked about, Graham's low-cost sensors and so on. What we don't have is the counterfactual, i.e. what would have happened had there been no CAS, because obviously we can't measure that. And the way we do this is we predict it using a model. And this is work that Euripides Kansas in our research group led. So the way this model works is we build a model, and this is machine learning. If you want to call it that, I would just call it a statistical model. And you train the model based on the pollutant of interest, so in this case NOx, that was observed before the clean air zone, and you essentially build a function of that as a function of hour of day, day of week, day of year, wind speed and direction, air temperature, and other parameters you wish. So the hour of day will get you the diurnal cycle, the day of week will get you the weekend versus weekday split, which is quite important. So NO2 certainly is lower at the weekend than it is in the week and the day of year. And you also get a trend term, which accounts for things like long-term changes in behaviour and fleet age and emissions from the fleet. And what we do is we take that model and then we give it post-CAS contemporaneous meteorology and conditions and temperature. And we then say, well, this is what the NOx would have been to the best estimate had there been no CAS. And that's what I'm showing here. So the effect of the CAS, and we did this for COVID as well, so we can do a nice comparison. The effect of the CAS is the actual observed measured NOx versus what the model says, not the actual NOx now versus a NOx in the past. So here I plot on the left here, this is the model that Euripides built. This is the difference between the model and the observed NOx in blue on the left-hand plot here before COVID, and then suddenly you see the COVID lockdown hits in March 2020, and we've got the amount of NOx has dropped, i.e. the effect of COVID was to reduce NOx. And on the right, I'm showing exactly the same approach, but for the CAS. So the blue is before the CAS, and then after the CAS is in the orange. And we can see that it is a bit difficult because you've got these spikes, and this is because the model certainly isn't perfect. But overall, we're seeing a small drop in predicted NOx relative to what we saw, i.e. the CAS is reducing NOx in this case by about 1.8% over the course of a whole year. So if I then look at all of these sites, we can see that COVID, so we've got 5 sites here. Pond Hill doesn't have any COVID data because it wasn't operational until after COVID, but you can see a long-term, a big drop, 30 to 50% due to COVID, and the CAS has got a much smaller drop, and that's of course understandable. COVID was such a large shock, roads without any cars, it's always going to have a bigger impact. So we can see that the CAS is generally reducing NOx by between 2 and 10%. The Lowfields one is perhaps a little bit questionable because we don't have a full year post-CAS implementation. But nevertheless, we're predicting consistent drops in NOx. And then if we look at the annual exceedances, we have to do this for NO2 because that's for what the metrics are. It's a bit more of a mixed picture. So if Devonshire Green, we're actually saying that the model would have exceeded, we've exceeded the limit two times more than we would have done with no CAS. But for the others, it is a drop. Barnsley Road, again, both situations were exceeding it far too much. But Pond Hill perhaps is the most promising there. But of course, as Rohit says, exceedances are one thing, but you could, if you just keep coming slightly below the exceedance, that's not much better than always slightly exceeding it. It's all about the total reduction, really. So just to conclude then, so we used a model to predict the no CAS counterfactual, which is the correct way to estimate the effect of an intervention. We find reductions in NOx in all 5 sites, ranging from 2 to 10%. Again, we should caveat this as we're looking at quite central areas, not in other areas like Burngreave, which someone mentioned in the comments. Site-specific impact on the number of daily air quality exceedances. And just coming back to PM, we haven't looked at PM, we haven't trained the model to do that. But as we pointed out before, there is a much smaller traffic signal, i.e. traffic affects PM much less. And I'd have to disagree with Graham there about the sources of PM is not burning in Sheffield. The biggest source of PM is is PM being transported from external regions. And you can show that by the PM signal in Sheffield across the city is dominated by, is much higher when we have winds coming over the Midlands and London and the English Channel and the continent than it is when we come over from the Peak District and things like that. So really, is CAS going to have an impact on PM 2.5? I would say probably much less than it has had on NOx. And just to highlight some of the work we did on Moorland Burning, I know Olivia has talked about this, but the 2 reports that we wrote, which were available on the Sheffield University Figshare, looking at what actually happens to the air quality and which locations were responsible for it, how the pollution was dispersed. It's a separate issue, so I'll leave you with these summary here. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for your presentation. I have a question here about PM 2.5 at nighttime, James. There is Jonathan is wondering if this peak on nighttime PM 2.5 could also be due to restaurant emissions and takeaway, more than just the meteorological or having.
Possibly. I mean, you'd have to do more. It's very easy for us to say, oh, well, we can think of one example and say, oh, it could be this, could be that, and you have to get data really, which is why Graham's work and Rohit's work about getting these long-term data sets is the key. The biggest effect of meteorology is the boundary layer. So that's the sort of layer of the atmosphere which is in contact with the surface and extends up to maybe 1 kilometer in the daytime. That can shrink, particularly on cold winter nights, and trap pollution. So that is when PM from burning and industry and restaurants and stuff can be stronger. But I wouldn't want to say it's definitely due to those.
Perfect. So Graham had some comments, but they weren't put on the Q&A, so I don't know if you can see, everybody can see them, probably just the moderators, but he said that he also found that COVID had a big impact of NO2, but it didn't impact, but the year started out with cleaner air, but then PM 2.5 actually went up significantly high during COVID because people start burning wood from the gardens and allotments and spending more time at home, so they would use their wood burners. So, but that was during COVID and for PM 2.5, but not for NO2, as you have shown as well, that there was no traffic and NO2 levels significantly decreased. So,
well, I mean, it's again, that may be a driver. But the reason PM was very low at the start of the year were the particular meteorological conditions we were experiencing. The strong storms, bizarrely, even though they pose their own threat to life, are very good for air quality, particularly the heavy rain as well. And again, the people burning stuff at home may have been a factor, but consistently for many years we've shown that PM in Sheffield is driven mostly by outside sources. So if wind is coming off the continent or the Midlands, that is really what controls PM in the city.
Okay. So we still, maybe the organizer can help me out here. We still have 8 more minutes to the end of the event. There are many questions, Q&A questions on the site. I don't know if Olivia is online, but there was a question about active travel that you could maybe address. For example, we are investing on cleaner zones because there is an expensive scheme, but what about investing on reliable public transport? And that would really deal with many, including displacement issues connected to air pollution. So shouldn't that be the main campaign priority for Labour?
Yeah, and I think in many ways it is. We're really committed on this in the city, but also nationally. We're wanting to do a lot more on buses and on rail as well, actually. And I think myself and Louise Haig, who is the Shadow Transport Secretary, we're trying to get some of the old historic train lines reopened, and we put in a bid to try and look at that, and that would have given an alternative as well on rail. But also we could look at tram extension, and there was a question about how can we improve air quality around hospitals. Well, not to condemn the decisions of predecessors of many generations, but I've never understood why we had set up a tram network that didn't connect the 2 major employers in the city in the NHS, which is our 2 major hospitals, which are both incredibly big sites and are not very well served because they're difficult to connect. And parking is a massive issue, and it's just a nightmare. And if we had the tram going to the hospitals, and it's quite a walk from the university Western hospitals that's just kind of said on the tram stop. So, you know, it's not really serving its purpose as public transport in its most accessible form at the moment. So I personally would love to have a situation, if we could start again, to connect our hospitals much more freely with the tram, or some alternative that would be really helpful to get people to hospital. Because surely if you're going for your health, you want your health to be supported, not made worse by the journey there. But yeah, certainly completely agree. You know, it's a big thing that I've been pushing for and will continue to push for. And, you know, I think Oliver Coppard's taking it really seriously. We're taking the tram back into public control. Hopefully that means there'll be more opportunity to invest any profits from that, although it will be running a deficit for a little while, back into projects. And also, you know, the money that's raised through the CAS is going to be spent in other areas of the city on schemes outside schools and things like that. So I think that there's lots of different ways in which we can have the benefit of that spread more widely across the city as well.
Perfect, thank you. James, you have raised your hands. You want to, before you, Graham, do you mind to turn on your camera so we can see all the panelists before we leave? Perfect. I don't know how long. Okay, thank you.
Just going to take this opportunity while we've got Member of Parliament here to say that, and this is not work for me, we're just relaying what other researchers have done. A lot of the PM is coming from, well, I guess what you'd call sort of extra city sources, some national, some international, a lot from agriculture. And so I think it's really important that individual cities understand that there's only so much they can do. And, you know, I love Sheffield, and you know, it's not the richest place in the world, so it really needs to focus on using its resources wisely. And I think, you know, Olivia, you have the opportunity to lobby for a better understanding of what is driving particularly PM. And it's not cash-strapped local authorities that can deal with it. It is national and indeed even international agreements on agricultural and emission practices. So there's no point in Sheffield imposing a CAS which has, you know, let's face it, financial penalties for small businesses, you know, people who are struggling to make ends meet if they can't then, you know, if it's beyond their control. And it is agriculture and industry in other parts of the country and other parts of Europe, which is dominating that. So I know it's one MP, but, you know, we need really good scientists delivering this in Parliament.
You're muted, Olivia. Sorry.
Just trying to unmute. Yeah, no, thank you for that, James. It's always very helpful. I'm one of the few MPs in Parliament with the science degree, so there's definitely a lot more space for scientists down here, definitely. So if you want to send me anything on that, you know, I'm more than happy to take a look and make sure that those messages are heard down here.
So thank you so much. Graham, Rohit, we are about to wrap up. So if you want to say a couple, just very briefly something, or we just conclude the event. Rohit, you are muted, sorry.
I was just looking at the questions, some of them asked. I could just try to quickly address a few, like someone mentioned about ultrafine particles. The best way to approach, it is difficult to measure ultrafine particles, but we could actually measure numbers much easier. So regardless of the size, if we just start actually counting the numbers, that would actually be much useful for the health risk purposes. What else? I forgot. I don't know. There was something about wood burning. Sorry, yeah, quickly. Oh yeah, Danielle. Hi. So there is like the Burn Better campaign by DEFRA, and they could publicize it. But as you asked, how to police them, there is no way to police them currently. So how the smoke control areas work, it's based on the London smog event. It was set 1952s. So you can only investigate if there is smoke coming out of your chimney, but you can't if you're actually using compliant wood stoves or compliant fuel. So practically, even entire Sheffield being in smoke control area, if you see smoke coming out of the chimney, you can't really do anything, because other way would be to literally peek into someone's house and see what stove you're using, which is also not allowed. So there needs to be some change in the laws to do that.
Okay, thank you, Rohit. So, Raham, there are many questions on the chat, and apologies that we haven't been able to cover all, but it's just for we only had 1.5 hours today, and we had all the panelists saying really interesting things about the cat. So I think we need to conclude, and I just want to thank you one more time, all the panelists, for staying all the time with us through the whole debate, and the Grantham Center for organizing the event, as well as the scholars that make this a great effort. So Rob, I don't know if you want to say something else, or
I just want to thank you, Maria, for
Okay.
for agreeing to chair the event, and it's been real help for us doing that. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everyone who came. Asked some fantastic questions. I'm sure we could have gone on for a discussion for a lot longer
go for
if
it.
we
Yeah,
had more time, but
Yeah.
I'm afraid I have to wrap it up here. Thank you also to the panelists for coming along and giving some fantastic talks. And also thank you to the Grantham Centre and the Festival of Debate for helping us put this on. It wouldn't have been possible without them, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rob. Bye now, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Time to leave.